Hi, I'm Paul Jay, and welcome to the Analysis.news. We're going to be discussing Trump's speech in front of, 800 generals with Larry Wilkerson. I'll be back in just a few seconds. So I work with AI all the time, like I assume lots of people these days. And I was interested what my AI agent or whatever would think of Trump's speech in front of all these generals. And I got hold of the transcript. I put it in AI, and my AI didn't believe it was real. My AI, I'm actually right now, I'm reading from my AI here. The document you showed me, meaning AI, appears to be fabricated. And this contains claims that would be globally significant news. Can you point me to verification sources? This distinction matters critically for your credibility. My AI didn't believe Trump could possibly say the crazy shit this guy just said. Now, I say crazy because I don't think this actually is so out of where he's been heading. I've been saying, and my guest today, Larry Wilkerson, is one of the few who also have been saying, this is preparation for martial law. This is preparation not to have, at the very least, presidential elections in 2028. And if they really look like they're tanking, they being the Republicans, maybe they are actually considering not having midterms. Trump, as we know, publicly stated during the election campaign, my dear Christians.
Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed.
Well, he does keep his promises, and this seems to be preparation for that. Here's what my AI, when they finally believed this was a legitimate document, highlighted: explicit domestic militarization, not just rhetoric, but operationally planning for military deployment in American cities, framed as combating enemies within. A $1 trillion military spending budget he brags about, but now the threat isn't external enemies. Now the threat is explicitly domestic threat. A new phase. Oh, this is the same point. Typically manufactured external threats like Soviet missiles, weapons of mass destruction. Now the explicit threat is American citizens are the threat that need a military response. Anyway, to discuss all of this and make some sense of it is Larry Wilkerson, who now joins us. Larry is a retired colonel in the U.S. Armed Forces. He was the senior chief of staff to Colin Powell, both at DOD and at the Sec State. And he is a friend of the show and a friend of mine. And both of us were just talking about someday might we be all rounded up in some baseball park somewhere. Thanks for joining us, Larry.
Good to be with you, Paul. Even if you are a Canadian.
I've always thought this world like in Handmaid's Tale, where you can have a Christian nationalist fascist government in the United States and La La Land in Canada. I don't think that's what happens. If we get where we're headed in the U.S., I don't think it's long before there's 1,000% tariffs on Canadian goods until Canada matches American politics. Anyway, what was your main takeaway from Trump's speech?
Well, if you count Carney as a different kind of Canadian leader, I think it may be some very fractious relations in the future. Listening to him talk, my take on that meeting was the same take initially that I had on Hegseth's video, which I watched several times. The one he essentially read the papers during. I'm very much acquainted with what he wanted to do in the major initiative there, because Rich Armitage, then Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs, ISA, and Colin Powell, then a major general and military assistant to Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger in the first Ronald Reagan administration, wanted to do the same thing. That is to say, reduce substantially the flag officers, the admiral and general rank officers in the military services, because they brought the same argument to Weinberger 12 million men in World War II. This was the ratio, and we were fighting a global conflict. Now we've got this many men and women in the military, and this is how many we got. The ratios are just terrible. We should get rid of a lot. And Weinberger looked at him and said, Reagan needs the Congress. And indeed he did, and indeed he got it in his first term. He was one of the most successful first-term presidents in terms of legislative relations ever. He got everything he wanted, including a massive arms buildup. So Weinberger was smart politically, you might say, and said, no, I'm not introducing this anywhere. So it died. Well, it rose again with Pete Hegseth. Amateur totally, but probably built for him by others in the Pentagon who are pretty smart and understand how this top-heavy rank structure is hurting us. But quickly, almost instantly, my positive hopes, wishes were dashed. And they were dashed in the lead up to the meeting. And then the meeting itself, which I had to watch a couple of times and that's sickening, especially Trump, to see what was happening and watch it from different angles. I mean, just the stoic look on all 800 or so of those people who were assembled there. I think it was 800. And there were a lot of aides out there too, captains, lieutenants, that kind of rank, was stunning. This is the president and your secretary of defense boss talking to you, and you're sitting there like robots. And I quickly
Trump had to comment on it when he first, right at the beginning of his speech, and we'll play the clips as I talk about them.
Yeah.
He actually looks out and he says, boy, I don't usually come into a room that's this quiet.
I've never walked into a room so silent before. This is very, don't laugh, you're not allowed to do that. You know what?
Like it was quite overt that they were not very enthused about what was
almost as if it were practiced. And I have to say that there's an old boys network in the military that people that don't know the military discount to their peril. And the old boy network in this case is generals like Mark Milley, and others out there who are still very much listened to by the current crop of flag officers. And so there's no question in my mind that calls went back and forth from PACOM, from EUCOM, from AFRICOM, between the commanders and the old boys. And the old boys were probably saying, hey, be very circumspect, don't show any emotions, sit there. Don't look like it's impacting you at all. Look like you're attentive. Don't compromise yourself in that way. It is the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States eventually. But that probably was their advice, and the consults were probably ripe and rich and all across the globe. So that's part of it. And another part of it is these people were acting circumspect, which military officers are tending to do. And in this case with these two clowns, and I use that term willingly and purposefully, these two clowns represent a three-ring circus with Trump in the middle, Hegseth on the left, and Rubio on the right. And everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. Even down in the ranks, there's a great proportion of the military that knows that, and they are worried.
Prior to the last election, 3 senior generals actually warned that if Trump loses the election, they were expecting another attempted coup and an actual split in the military. When I say another attempted coup, that's because I'm talking about January 6th.
January 6th, yeah.
And the days leading up to January 6th, which are even more significant, when 10 former secretaries of defense and Milley and even the Financial Times overtly warned of a coup in progress, and then it fails, but they go ahead with the craziness on the 6th anyway. These 3 generals that were warning before the last election, they were talking about 2 power centers, 2 different potential presidents, like real chaos, except Trump does win the election. So what's happening now, there's no reason to think Trump would not cross all kinds of legal lines, especially when the Supreme Court seems to be siding with most of what he wants to do. But when you go back to Trump's speech and the generals sitting there and whether they're going to go along with all this, which it seems to me this is what this was all about. You know, we're planning potential martial law. We're going to train you. He says this explicitly.
And I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military.
We're going to use going into the big cities to train you on how to, he didn't use the word occupy, but occupy big cities, mostly, quote, in the radical democratic left-controlled cities. And you're here in this room to listen to us. I'm filling this in because we're going to see who's loyal and who isn't.
All right.
And if you're not, and this is a quote, and we'll play the video, we know everything about you. And if you don't like what I'm saying, you can get up and leave now.
And I'll tell you, Pete and General Kane, and all of the people that I've met that have been lifted up in rank, and we got many of them out of here too, I'll be honest with you. Didn't like doing it, but we got many of you out of here because we weren't satisfied. We know everything about everybody.
And of course, you'll be leaving behind your career. This whole thing was an explicit, overt threat. You're going to go along with this occupation of American cities, and you're going to forget about posse comitatus and all the legislation that says you're not supposed to do this, or you get the hell out of the military. Am I misreading this?
I think you're reading it in the direst interpretation, but I don't think you're necessarily wrong in that direst interpretation. I do think there's some things left. I think I told you earlier interview, or maybe just a conversation we were having, the January 6th coup didn't fail because the system held. It failed because the coup plotters were incompetent. They are not going to make that mistake again. And the most vivid element of their incompetence was what's necessary for any coup in terms of it succeeding is military support. They're the only people in the state authorized to kill people and to have weapons and the panoply of gear and such to do it. He started with the militia, and that was very smart because the militia is less apt to object. Its governors and adjutants general might object, as some have, Pritzker in particular now in Illinois. And I think we might be looking at a Fort Sumter event in Illinois with Pritzker. Because he's very eloquent and detailed in his condemnation of
what does that
Trump
mean, a Fort Sumter event?
When they fired on Fort Sumter, we started the Civil War, state on state and state on federal. But starting with the militia in some ways is smart because it's not as well trained. It's not as dedicated to the what Hegseth is talking about, the ethic of the warrior. The ethic of the warrior for these people in the active duty forces is coupled with the ethic of the Constitution and their oath. Not so much so, and I'm not demeaning the militia, I'm just saying that they haven't been exposed to the training and education that the active forces have.
Okay, when you say militia, you mean
the National Guard, National Guard, and reserve forces in general. And they are also very beholden on federal money. People think they belong to the governors. They do in terms of operational direction, but not when they're federalized. When they're federalized, they get more money. And when they're federalized, they are operating for the President of the United States, just like active duty forces, but they don't have the training, they don't have the education, they don't have the background and such. So that's where he started, is using the militia. I've talked to them. I've talked to them in Monaghan Station in New York. I've talked to them in Union Station in Washington. I've talked to them on the street of DC, talked to 3 or 4 yesterday, and included in my conversation DC police on the streets in front of the Capitol. And they're kind of confused. They're doing a good job. I met one soldier who was from my home state of South Carolina, and he looked strapped and squared away. Told me his unit, told me that they were hurting in South Carolina, so they had to borrow from North Carolina. The reserves are, in other words, very under strength right now. If we went to war, we wouldn't have any hospitals, Paul. The reserve component has the hospitals, the nurses, and the doctors, and there's almost nothing there. So Trump's touting the military and our ability, best military in the world, fight Russia, fight China, whatever, is nonsense, pure nonsense. And he doesn't care, really.
Okay, let me do another thing from Trump's speech here. And it's essentially, here's the doctrine or protocol. I'm not sure the exact word, but he tells the soldiers this term of lethality. We're here to kill, which is what Hegseth says. We're here to kill the enemy.
Yeah.
Well, part of this is going to be directed at Americans. Here's a quote from Trump. He talked about how he's seen these pictures of demonstrators spitting at soldiers, and they have to just stand there and take it. And he says, no more. Here's what he says. They spit, we hit.
They spit, it's a new thing. They spit, we hit.
So he's talking about applying this lethality concept against Americans in American cities. I mean,
Precisely.
He's calling for a militarized police state.
Precisely what he's doing on the high seas too, with 3 boats now.
Yeah.
Totally against international law and totally against domestic law. He's using force without any blessing, if you will, by the Congress of the United States, cowards all. And he's using force that is totally in violation of international law. I said yesterday to a policeman downtown in DC, I said, if you come on a guy on the corner of New York Avenue and he's selling cocaine, sitting on a carton, selling cocaine, and the line down New York Avenue is 1,000 long, and you know he's selling cocaine and he's selling it and making a profit right there in front of your eyes, and you pull out your service revolver and you shoot him dead. Is that legal? That is exactly what Trump did on the high seas. That's what our military did on the high seas.
So let's go back to the beginning. So 800 generals all sitting in this big room being threatened with being purged because we know everything about you, which is blackmail, which means Trump is essentially saying, I mean, overtly, it's not essentially.
No.
He's saying he's
bragging.
We have intelligence agencies. We vet you guys to be a general. We vet your personal lives. It's not like we don't stop looking at who and what you're doing, and we'll use it against you if you don't go along with all this. The threat was explicit. He says, we know everything about you. So the soldiers are sitting.
And we retired guys are in the 3rd and 4th echelon probably for this. They're going to go after the active guys first, the reservists and the guard. Then they're going to come after us because on alternative media, we are doing damage to them.
Well, he overtly threatened to go after Milley. Did he actually do anything about it?
I wouldn't be surprised that he hadn't got something going. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
So these guys are sitting there. They know their constitutional oath, and the loyalty is to the Constitution, to the country, not to the president. They know that. They understand posse comitatus, which specifically constitutionally restricts domestic military use, except in the most absolutely extreme circumstances, which like what's going on in Portland now, sending troops into Portland, and they're all eating ice cream in the square. There's nothing going on in Portland. And they're showing video from a year ago to justify it. They know they're hearing explicit directives about using cities as training grounds for taking over cities. And they know American citizens are now being called enemies from within, which are supposed to now give constitutional cover for doing all this. They're dead quiet. The places where Trump's expecting applause, he ain't getting it.
No.
Do they have the guts to stand up? Now, when he invited them to get out of the room, if they didn't like it, nobody stood up and got out. So nobody's really sticking their neck out yet. What do you think? Because let's just add one other little wrinkle to this thing. This is the president who has sole authority over nuclear weapons. So in this atmosphere, is anyone going to say no to this guy?
That frightens me probably more than anything else that you prefaced your remark with. It really does. I can only add to the argument that I think there's enough sobriety, although the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff's remarks, raising Cain, if you will, didn't give me a lot of hope in this regard. I thought maybe he was being a mollifying voice in there between the president himself and the secretary and the forces, but I think he's just a cheerleader now. That's my impression. But I think there are at Strategic Command and other places people like Milley who would object and who would not do what they're told to do if it were an errant order in their view with regard to nuclear weapons. And then you have the other side of the coin, which is Russia has even more warheads than we do, for example. And if there were any untoward action that happened, we'd disappear. There's no question in my mind about that. It would be a general nuclear exchange and we'd disappear, as would the Russians and most of the world, if not the entire world. So I hope that's sobering enough to where people beneath Trump, if he were to go just absolutely insane, even Hegseth would step in and prevent that happening. That may be a forlorn hope, but I hope not. And then
I can't see Hegseth saying no to Trump about something.
Well, when it comes to the destruction of the country, and he's a baboon, but he's got to know what we're talking about here.
Oh, you mean if Trump actually ordered some?
Yeah, if he ordered an attack, yeah. Now, not a single nuke or a couple of nukes. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised at all that we don't let the genie out of the bottle, so to speak, by using a couple of 3 nuclear weapons in anger against our enemies. And principally here would be because we already have the motivation to do so and the cheerleader to help us along, Netanyahu, Iran. And that worries me, particularly since I think Iran has made a decision. They've said things like what I'm hearing from Tehran University, for example. They've decided, and the Ayatollah was the one who decided this, that the fatwa, which I was briefed on by 2 different Iranian foreign ministers and believed what they told me. Would you like me, one of them said in clear English, to go to the UN Security Council and operationalize, that's a good term, isn't it? He knew I was military, the fatwa in blood in front of the UN Security Council. We find nuclear weapons anathema to our version of Islam. That's what he said. Now I hear the Ayatollah has approved a change of the fatwa. Use of nuclear weapons is an abomination, not possession. That tells me they're going to build a nuclear weapon. So look at the circumstances here. We got a crazy man in Jerusalem with nuclear weapons, not a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, a rampant rogue nuclear state, if you will. And it is. There's no other way to look at it. And Iran perhaps giving them provocation and probably exchanging with them.
Add another piece to it. The Saudis now have a deal with the Pakistanis.
Absolutely.
So essentially, the Saudis now have nuclear weapons.
I think so. And I think MBS set that up years ago when he first got the defense ministry portfolio and he was sort of stretching his muscles. He went to Islamabad and gave him $20 billion and said, if we need anything nuclear wise to counter Iran, we'd like 20,
All right. So let me back up here a bit because I personally don't think there's a high likelihood Trump's going to deliberately use nukes. He personally has a lot to lose, and who knows? But
does he care?
Well, I think he does. I think he does. I think he's all about money and his houses and his women and so on.
I did too, but now that he's gotten so old that he's as old as I am, and he's deteriorating before my eyes. Physically deteriorating before my eyes. I mean, I'm 81. I recognize this kind of deterioration. I recognize it in Biden. They did nothing about Biden. He was a year in dementia. I mean, no question about it.
But don't you think that if he really starts losing it, Vance and the cabal, the Christian nationalist cabal, and others, they'll get rid of Trump, and they'll have
if they want to do a coup. They won't do it with the 25th Amendment because they lose their jobs. You just don't do that. That's the reason they didn't get rid of Biden. Lincoln and Sullivan were happy. They were happy. They were running the government.
Right.
You can't get the cabinet to vote on moving the president out unless he's lied in front of you dead.
Well, I'm sure they have a plan of some sort, but let's go.
Vance is the plan. You're right. Vance is the
That's his
plan.
plan. And
Peter Thiel standing right there behind him with his South African bona fides as a white man who hates anyone of color.
yeah, the techno Christian nationalists combined with the militarist like Karp from Palantir and the crazy
Yeah.
guy from Andril. I mean, these guys they're like idiot savants. That they're living in some crazy fascistic bubble, metaphysical bubble. They think they're going to live forever, but they actually do know technology. So
Yes.
it's a weird jiving. But let me go back to Trump's speech, and we'll
Yep.
talk again about this other stuff. So, what do you think happens? So, he has thrown the gauntlet down to Chicago and Illinois and the governor. He has called the governor names. I mean, he has made such a challenge to Illinois and Chicago that if he doesn't do something to Chicago, Trump's going to look weak. So, what does Prince? I pronounce his name incorrectly all the time.
Pritzker, yeah.
Pritzker. So what does a governor have? The National Guard, in theory, will be federalized. He's got state police that may or may not be loyal to him. I would assume the state police will, maybe in Chicago would be loyal, but you never know in the rest of the state. What does this look like? If do they go in and arrest the governor?
You might see something like that, or you might see an attempt at something like that. But I think what follows that is probably, at least inside Illinois and perhaps in adjoining states, Missouri comes to mind immediately, because Missouri is being lost to MAGA as fast as any state in the union. And it is primarily the 40s and below that they're losing. And Charlie Kirk was part of this. Charlie Kirk was part of starting this, or they were part of starting Charlie Kirk to be a different Charlie Kirk, the younger people in the Republican Party who detest Israel. Marjorie Taylor Greene is probably a better mouthpiece right now for these younger people in the nation than anyone else in Washington, because she understands what's happening to her base under 40, and she understands that that's the future. And so she's breaking away from this group. Tom Massey has understood it for a long time and has.
Can I just add a caveat, at least from me? I don't know whether you agree or not. The caveat is detest what Israel's doing in Gaza, what Israel's doing in terms of apartheid. I think a lot of people who agree in principle with what I just said, they don't necessarily detest Israel as a state.
No. It's what they're doing there and what we're allowing them to do. And I think their detestation is as much of us, if not more of us, as it is of Israel for doing it, because they understand we're allowing it to happen. And incredibly, in my view, a lot of these young people understand how much it's costing us, as opposed to what could be due. Make America great again is not accomplished by making Israel great.
I want to get back to Illinois, Chicago. So here's where I'm heading. If this happens, and it already happened to some extent in LA, but not to the extent he's talking about, if he really goes into a full-fledged, essentially martial law in Chicago and a federal takeover,
good luck on the South Side.
There's an answer for that.
You'll get fought to tooth and nail on the South Side. And there's some
I was about to say, I lived in Baltimore for almost 11, 12 years, and most people have guns. It ain't going to go smoothly in Baltimore, which is maybe why he threatened Baltimore and hasn't done it.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is millions of people have to hit the streets. Millions. Because that's when you might really see splits in the National Guard, in the military. If they have to start facing, when they spit, we will hit. Well, if you're facing 1 million people in the streets,
right,
you're going to be careful about hitting when they're spitting. In fact, you may side with those millions of people in the streets. So in terms of what's coming, what I'm saying is people had better get organized to hit the streets in massive numbers.
The question they asked me at the Capitol yesterday from I think it was a reporter in the audience, what would you recommend that people do? I said, let me tell you an experience I had at the beginning of the Second Iraq War. I was in London and I saw Bobby's horses that couldn't move. I saw Bobbies who were trapped, horses that were panicking. the largest anti-war demonstration in human history, as far as I'm concerned, and many papers pronounced it such, happened in London. That's what needs to happen in the United States in every freaking city across this country.
And I think it can. And I think as much as we go on about what Trump's planning and it's like Mussolini and blah, 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 we're not into this full-fledged police state yet.
Yes.
And there's still time to push back. So I don't want to, people shouldn't get paralyzed by what's happening. Quite the contrary.
I think that's what Governor Pritzker was intimating in his very cogent remarks that he made about what was happening to his state and his city.
Now, I do want to add one thing, which I always add, and it needs to be said, and I know you agree with this, but I'll say it. I'm going to say it because it needs to be said. Corporate Democrats, and under all the administrations since World War II, helped create this whole situation because they kept representing the interest of Wall Street,
yep,
the big banks, and they had policies that under all kinds of liberal rhetoric actually facilitated the greatest inequality in the history of the country.
They helped build MAGA.
They've tilled the soil for MAGA.
Yep.
So let's not forget it, but and let's not have illusions about them, because if the MAGA forces are defeated and all that happens is you get another round of corporate Dems, you'll just get another MAGA, and maybe it won't be Trump, but they'll come back with even more force. So without illusions about corporate Democrats, millions of people have to stand up to what's happening.
Yes, and they have to build their own alternative political structure in some way. I don't know whether you revamp the two existing parties or you build a new party or whatever, but you're right. Both parties are equally guilty for where we are right now.
Well, there is some progressives with some motion. You got Mandami in New York. There's others across the country. There's something happening there.
Yeah.
And so it's not just hitting the streets. That's an important point. There needs to be an electoral piece to this. Otherwise, you can't actually change who has power.
And you can bet your last dollar that Steve Miller and others who are not dumb are very evilly smart. They know this, and so they will go after these nascent movements in this operation that Trump suggested at the very beginning. They will try to kill these nascent movements at the very beginning, whether it's New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Portland, wherever. They have a pointed attack planned for the beginning of this to take out these nascent movements before they get time to build.
Well, if history's any judge, these nascent movements eventually become way more than nascent.
Yep.
We've seen some terrible regimes, whether it was in the Philippines or in Iran. We've seen such police state regimes fall when millions of people decided, I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So let's hope this is what this moment is bringing. We'll talk more soon, Larry. Thanks very much.
Surely. Take care. Keep Canada safe.
Thank you for joining us on theAnalysis.news. Please don't forget to sign up on our email list if you want to keep track of what we're doing, and there's a donate button and all of that. Thanks again.